Okay, good morning, good day, good afternoon, guys. Never mind where you are. I'm doing this space pretty quickly, first of all, because the space yesterday was a bit rocky at the end, and I'm not very proud of that. But what is done is done. It's recorded, so I'm not like ashamed of it. Why I'm doing this space is to actually review my prediction and review a bit my plan over Avdiivka. Why? Because, as I said, we're going to soon be at the first month, but a couple of new things happen. First of all, there is a video from the 110th Salo Brigade. The video is pretty normal for most of the Ukrainian forces right now. It shows parts, except of the initial assault from the Russian forces around the northern area. It's not pretty, but we have seen them like tens of times. I personally have seen every single loss, every single video that's out there over Avdiivka, because I wanted to more or less understand what's going on. It's a bit sadomasochistic, but I mean, at some point you need to admit what's going on. And well, what was interesting on that video, as I already pointed out, is that they are basically panhandling for drones, because they've lost over 20 drones during the last couple of weeks, and that, to my interest, actually gave the answer to the claim that a supposed pro-Russian did. If you follow me, you know what the feud was. That why weren't there FPVs in Avdiivka? Why weren't there drone in Avdiivka, and so on and so on. Well, it's pretty simple. Now we know exactly why. The couple of first days, there weren't Russian drones. Russians probably blunted the area with electronic warfare, and therefore what they tried to do is having their own drones dropping down, because that's the whole point. You don't want to lose your own drones while you're blunting the air with electronic warfare. This also explains why we don't have that much footage after the 20th of October from the Ukrainian side. We have some FPV shots, we have some Baba Yaga shots. The Baba Yaga are between the 17th and the 24th. But after that, there's not so much. And initially, we had almost no footage from the Russian side. It was one RIA footage or Izvestia footage with one Ukrainian tank being taken out, couple of positions fleeing, and then there were a couple of footages from the attack of the Katran position. Katran position was just next to the heap that the Russians took. You probably have seen that. It's the video where two Russians are pushing back a whole bunch of Ukrainians from the Okop, and then they take it over. You have to be warned about that footage. I'm pretty sure we're going to see the aftermath of that a couple of days from now. It's not pretty, because guys over there communicated that they killed a lot of Ukrainians. So there was no mass surrendering. Apparently, maybe we're going to have some Timor criminal footage coming by. But the positions was taken, and that position was visited from Baba Yaga's the upcoming days. Now, why the footage was very important? As I said, first of all, they're begging for drones. Second, they show electronic warfare from the Russian side, making it almost impossible to stay on air for longer than a couple of minutes. And then we have the other point, far more important. At that point is that we see geolocation with the Russians being in certain positions. And I pointed out, you already seen it on the timeline, geolocations is showing that the Russians are where? They're beyond the railway, just next to the coke plant. We know that the footage is at least 3 to 4 days old, which means that for a while now the Russians are creeping in, and maybe they are already to the coke plant, as was said by both Ukrainians and Russian sources. I do not believe that anything drastic has happened in between. They maybe are occupying either the passages in front of the coke plant or the two main buildings that I already said. You have a three-phase approach that you can do. And the most important part is to bring down the bridge that goes over the railway. Why? Because that bridge actually can be used by night, especially to go in the back, plant repeaters, plant booby traps, and so on. And that's very important to absolutely take out. Although it would be very risky and hazardous for Ukrainians to do that, but they're stupid enough, and they also have now remote means, small robots, drones, and so on. So that thing needs to be brought down to avoid having such a passage. And the other problem, of course, I already pointed out, there is a tunnel network under the coke plant that goes inside the city, up the north of the city. One exit is at dispensary number 3. This is apparently from the Soviet times, it's known. The other goes outside direction of Berdichi, and the third one goes down along the Kimki bus station, which is also up north. So if they have created other tunnels, I don't know. Honestly, there is not much info over that. But most of it, they can still communicate within the city, even though the Russians may cut off the plant visually from the rest of it. Now, why is this very important? Is this very important because now we're having evidence, and it's not evidence that we are providing, the Russians are providing. It's literally an outpost. The second part is the strike from a Lancet to a stopped Bradley, be that the Bradley was stuck to an Avery or whatever, 30 kilometers from the theoretical Lancet position, but about 15 kilometers from the front, actually, in Ocheretine. That part is very important. I said once again, unfortunately, the previous space covering Avdiivka is gone. I'm trying to do another one with a review because I have the maps that I did, and I also have an idea to where this is going. So why I'm making this review? The review is the following. Well, basically, I have this feeling that I have given up for the moment to attack directly to the south. That was my biggest option, and the Russians have decided not to do it. Why? I understand why. As I told you, it is a very hard sector. It's well prepared. There are trenches, and if the Ukrainians man them, it's going to be literally the Somme. A micro Somme, but it's going to be the Somme. So on that part, Russians have decided, for reasons that have probably to do partly because of attrition, but also partly because they don't want to get stuck in there, to not go over there. What they're doing is that, as I said, they're taking the quarry, coming closer to 9th district, taking over the Zenit old military post, and then just strangling the passage of troops from the 9th district and so on. To me, that's very, 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 very slow, but it's very, very, very safe. It's a smart choice given what's going on up north. And up north, after the first push, which was the main push actually, they literally wanted to do that. Go full north, cut the road, push the guys at Ocheretine. They thought also that they were undermanned, which apparently they were, given the advance of the Russian troops, even though it's slower. We can see exactly what's going on. Now, the second part, most important part, is that the hit of the Bradley and Ocheretine, to me, maybe that's not true once again, but that's both what I'm seeing and also my hunch. That means that the troops that were transferred from the Zaporozhye axis, the 47th, and probably a second brigade is going to join them. They are not stationed in Ocheretine to come back as a QRF. Whatever they are stationed up north, it's behind it. Actually, if you remember what I said on the space over Avdiivka, I said that the artillery is going to be there, and that artillery, unfortunately, given that they have a lot of backspace, is going to make it very, very complicated to attack by the north. For some reason, and once again, I don't know what's going on. I don't know how well informed the Russians were, because apparently my plan, my previsions are not going slower than what I predicted, but they're going on the completely contrary axis. And this is the thing. is the Ukrainian artillery that depleted over there that they are forcing their own quick reaction forces to come from so back field 15, 20 kilometers that they're going to be visible. So there's going to be enough time to react, including launching a Lancet from Avdiivka, and then the Lancet comes to strike a stuck Bradley or a stuck Leopard. This is the funny thing. It means that what I said, we have a situation for the Ukrainians, and Butuzov said this. I'm going to tell you, as I said, Butuzov said just this, said, we have a problem because up north, we don't have much defensive positions. But that's not important if they have or they don't have many defensive positions. As I told you guys, I'm going to repost everything. When you go after Stepove, you are in a deep. You're in a mini valley, and it doesn't matter whatever positions you're going to have there. Berdishi, west of Stepove, you're under the height that comes above, on top of you. So basically, you are at disadvantage, and you need to do both things. Recoil, go back to Berdishi from Semenivka along a very narrow, basically valley. It's really micro valley, but that means that you're going to get hit repeatedly. And of course, it's not that far, so the Russians can even fucking send you FPVs. Now we understand what I said when I had this dispute with this person who likes to speak out of his ass without waiting for further confirmation. This is one of the things that I always said. This war has so many faces and so many facets. We don't know what's really happening. Both sides show us what they want to see. But the problem is that trying to take at face value things that do not exist as such. So basically, when you see the 110th showing the same fucking footages for now a whole month, and those footages can be literally put between the 10th and the 21st, you should ask yourself what the fuck's going on. But some people don't want to see that. They were like, oh yeah, for 3 days this happened. Apparently for 3 days this happened because the electrical warfare on the Russian side was too blunt, and those idiots, they didn't thought about, maybe risking a couple of drones or FPVs to ease our situations, and that's why they were using helicopters with Izdelia 305 to replace the fact that they didn't have FPVs for the days of these assaults. It apparently didn't work all that well. There were other issues, given the area was freshly mined and so on. We have discussed with members of Team War Criminal a couple of views from the video I spoke about, the 110th video, when you can see that despite the fact that tanks had anti-mine trailers and also plows, they would still go up despite the fact that the mines were visible. Why? And I've already explained this. In this war, the mining process is not just going through a minefield. Is taking into account the fact that you're going to have visible and invisible mines, take into account that not all mines are just mines. Sometimes you got proper EADs. And in many cases, on both sides, you got double, triple stacks, and you also got reactive EADs. So basically, you just fucking blew up a mine with a fucking trailer. That sets off a pressure plate. The pressure plate literally sets up about 200 to 300 kilograms of explosives, and your tank can go fuck himself. And that's why you have these huge explosions right away, while at the same time you got other tanks just rolling on a normal TM62 having damage. We're not saying that, but not being critically accelerated to the point they end up as mini rockets. And this is the funny part here. Once again, guys, pay attention to everything. We're gonna see things happening, and as I said, it's gonna be a logic process. Right now, the situation is that, and Zaluzhny, that is not extreme. It's not wrong. I actually even said that before he wrote his fucking piece on The Economist. On many aspects, both sides are choosing what is interesting for them. The Russians don't want to rush this. On the other side, the Ukrainians is all that what they got. So when they go in the fucking minefield with a Leopard 2 and Leopard gets stuck or get hit or whatever, it's not that they're not smart and they're stupid. There are some brain dead people in that country, but as in every other country, but that's how they can, as the only means they have. On the other side, when the Russians did the fucking bomb rush on Krasnogorivka, it's not that they don't want to demine up front. It's simply because they want to be in a position where they're going to impose their will gradually later on. But you need first to be to a certain position, and then it's very simple. Are you going to take 2 to 3 weeks, allow them to put to branch the artillery to hit you back, or are you just literally sacrifice vehicles and men, get into certain positions as we're seeing in Stepove, lock the northern part where now every single Ukrainian commentator that's not a fucking Zelia stooge is saying we have a huge problem up north because the supply up north is done. Now, it's not only about supplies. As I said, the biggest issue right now is the QRF. The Quick Reaction Force that was supposed to come in the form of Bradleys and Leopards and whatever, tried 3 up to now that I know, 3 different attacks. One, the major one that we saw, basically there was the Leopard plus the 4 Bradleys that were Nahui, normal, it's pretty logical. They were spotted from far enough. Was it a T-72 that hit with heat? I don't fucking care. It's not the point. The point was that counter push was defeated. On the other side, there is recent footage, and I discussed it with Gammon and the guys from the Team Criminal Crew, where they are hitting up north of Stepove now. There's the T-90M lighting up the railway, very north of Stepove, about 600 to 800 meters. And it's also showing that they're clearing up the forest belt upstairs, and they're going to push and push and push and push and push. This doesn't seem to stop. It's very gradual. It's slow. It's okay, but that's how it was with Wagner as well in Bahmut. The difference, though, is that now we are literally seeing that the situation that Wagner had to undergo, and yesterday I spoke about it, everybody was very happy, including me, myself, of thinking that Wagner was losing maybe a bit too many people, but they were saving assets, artillery, tanks, whatever. Then when I went to check the numbers, also the geolocations, I discovered that, in fact, Wagner had lost a fuck ton of artillery, and that, in fact, the whole deal with Wagner is like they were going through artillery like fucking crazy in 2023. Plus, there was some other losses in 2022, but that wasn't the point yesterday. But today, if you want to analyze it, Wagner literally lost as many artillery pieces in 2023 that are apparently have been lost by this push in terms of personal carriers and tanks and so on. So what's going on here? I'm saying what again? This advance is going to be the only way forward for both sides. If they want to advance, they're going to have to lose people, material, and so on. However, here, Ukrainians are forced beyond Ocheretine. Is very important, and a lot of people maybe asked me, "What the hell? I'm a bit at a loss." That's the whole point. Now, whatever you're going to do. And that's, Marty said to me, Rabotino Part 2, it's true, man. We pushed back now whatever reinforcement or staging point the Ukrainians are going to have up north, 15, 20 kilometers. That means that you are not only closer to your objective, and you can fucking grind it, but also if they want to come through, even a fucking Lancet who's rather slow, is going to make it on time to hit them way before they can come and threaten your troops. And this is the bottom line here. I wasn't expecting this to come so early. I'm not going to lie to you. I thought that, for instance, Lancet were going to hunt for artillery around the 10-meter line, so around Semenivka, around Karlivka maximum. But now we discover that those idiots from the 47th, and it makes sense why they are over there. It makes completely sense if you see the highway. I actually highlighted that. To transfer these guys by rail or by truck or by themselves, you need a high-speed transfer road. So what they did, they literally cut through the southern Ukraine, and that's why they're actually behind Ocheretivka. And it's perfect for right now, for as long as they don't help the Ukrainians gain a foothold back up north, they can stay there as much as they want. Because if it's going to be an artillery war, given you need to exploit whatever damage the artillery is going to do, you are going to reduce the people in Avdiivka who are defending it, especially the coke plant, to an infantry war. And that part, as I said, given how the Russians now are more or less free to use their tanks along the railroad, and I know FPV is going to come, whatever. That's not, once again, all these parts I know. And that's why I'm saying this is going to happen more or less the same way as the Wagnerites did in Soledar and then further down in Bahmut. But in this case, the fact that you can have the tanks where actually you had, sorry guys, we are back. So the whole point here, as I said, now the fact that their quick reaction forces, their reinforcement, their armored fist is so back behind, that means you can see them come, you can attack them way before the line. The second part, as I said, you're going to have to force whatever reinforcement, especially light ones, infantry, supplies, and so on, to go within the internal road. The outside road to go down is apparently quote unquote closed. Of course, this is not true because it's one lancet, and as we say, one bird doesn't make the spring come. Completely logical, and I agree with you guys. This has nothing to do with it's not a triumphalistic space, quite the contrary. But this is the first sign that whenever they're coming, they're not coming from Oceretine, and Oceretine also is very small to hide leopards, bralets, and so on. But that means that we are in the same situation as Rabotino, where they have to come from so far, you see them come, and you can take, hopefully, concrete countermeasures. Now, second point is, once again, I'm going to repeat what I said early on. I do not understand why the South is not being pushed. I understand the meaning of it. That means that it's considered way too much of a hassle right now, and there are way too much Ukrainians defending that position. Logical, once again. It's just going to take more time down south. But the whole point of my initial approach was that pressuring on both sides would have made it more complicated for Ukrainians to defend the city. Pressuring up north alone, even if the situation tactically and strategically is a lot better, will still allow them to be able to somehow concentrate their forces around the axis of attack. Now, the second point of this is that there was recently a video from Ukrainians getting inside the city from the Lastochkina Road. Small pickup, and the entrance and the passage through the Lastochkina Road inside the city is completely destroyed. I'm going to post the video, but probably a lot of guys have already seen it. And this is, once again, what I said. It's not because you do not see geolocated attacks on lost armor that there are no attacks. It's quite the contrary. But once again, I keep saying like this. This war has so many facets. We don't know what the reality of it 100%. Even what I'm saying right now might completely come out as untrue. But what we are seeing on the ground, confirmed by both sides, is that instead of being this heroic defense of the city of Avdiivka, actually the Ukrainians might have very well gotten into a trap themselves, and by bringing a counteroffensive brigade already battered but re-equipped, they are only going to make things worse, not because we had any kind of hope that the counter would go on beyond the mid or end of November. I honestly thought within the 10th or 15th of November it would be done, and that's why we're seeing. We are into a position right now where I don't really understand what to make of it. Because, okay, strategically and tactically, every ingredient is there to contribute to a major loss for Ukraine, although Avdiivka itself is really nothing. Let's be honest. They're going to lose 20 to 30 square kilometers, and if they lose the backfield behind Avdiivka until the Karlivka Reservoir and the small river going there, it's going to be 200 square kilometers. In absolute terms, it's nothing. Now, strategically, it's something else because, as I said, you're gonna probably make Ukrainians evacuate Ocheretine, then open your way up for Berezivka. If you cut Berezivka, I already said you create a situation for Ukraine in terms of logistics that would be absolutely impossible to bear in short term, which means that you are gonna gain without firing a single shot, just cutting that road there, a major foothold on the Ukrainian rear defenses. Now, the biggest situation with this, and I always said it, is that by doing so, you are going to also force the Ukrainian hand to reinvest a lot more in the Donbass. And this was, I think, and I always said it, this was the whole point from the Russian military leadership. Avdiivka itself is just a step. Of course, it's a political goal, freeing Donbass from basic artillery rounds and so on. That's okay. But the most important part in here is like, and we had discussion with Snikotron, so I don't think he's going to be 100% okay with this, but I think right now is to force the Ukrainians to understand that whatever they are preparing, F-16s, ATCMS, long-range aviation, it doesn't matter. Right now, what matters is the reality on the ground, and the reality on the ground is that your strategic objective of cutting the Crimean land bridge is gone. You spent a huge load of material, men, and supplies to that goal, and it's not working. And on the other side, whatever they are preparing on Kherson, because this is the thing, everybody's like Kherson, 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 Kherson. Yeah, okay, let's see where it goes. I would be the pretty much the first to say, okay, I was wrong about it. But I don't think there is anything possible there unless a massive influx of equipment that can be seen for a motherfucking moon. And as I said, the biggest situation is also the only way to hide them is Kherson, Berislav, and Kakova on the other side. And that would be at least 3 pontoons, and that's the danger around Kherson. No double thinking about it. Kherson is the area when they're gonna make the double, triple pontoon to try and pass forces. Everywhere else, ground is too soft. There are no piers, and it would take them between 2 and 3 hours to prepare the force. 2 and 3 hours. That means that at least 4 to 5 Su 34s with UMPKs, even if half misses, are going to rain into your party. I'm not speaking about helicopters. I'm not speaking about Landsets, FPVs, artillery. This is secondary. What's most important right now is that you need to create to your Ukrainian side a window with artillery, with rockets, with ATACMS, with HIMARS of 3 to 4 hours when they can work undisturbed. This has never happened unless in one part. And that was the attack on David Bridge. And even that, the pontoons were attacked. And even there, the equipment was shot. But the Russians were under-equipped, understaffed, and the positions were in a rather bad supply line with, of course, the Dnieper behind them and the bridges getting blown non-stop. Here, the Ukrainians are going to be on the other side, because once the pontoons are down, then you need to set up new pontoons, and then you have the whole Macarena show that we actually had with the Russians in Izium, that it took the Russians, I think, a whole battalion in Izium to set 4 different pontoons in order to cross into the city and capture it. But back then, the Russians could throw tanks like they were candies. The Ukrainians cannot do it right here, especially not for the area they're going to try and occupy, which is a very, very, very marshy ground and very difficult to navigate with whatever vehicle over 10 tons. As for the rest, this was just an express. I also spoke about a couple of new things. First of all, the F-16s. On the previous space, I had already explained that the Dutch were sending planes into eastern Romania for training. The claim from the Dutch Ministry of Defense is that it's both for Ukrainian and Romanian troops. As I said, once we see the livery of the planes, we will know for who the planes are. I really think that the initial livery is going to be gray. It's going to be a nationless fighter. The same that we had with the Slovak MiG-29s. The Slovak MiG-29s, they were prepared. Then the Slovak Kokat was taken out, and they were flown around just to check the planes. And supposedly they flew into Ukraine. They never landed in Ukraine. Actually, then most of the transit happened by truck, which was rather hilarious. So in this case, I also think that delivery for the F-16 is going to be a nationless one. They're not going to have a proper identification. Of course, internally they're going to have it because there is always a registry number for them, a board number. But once we're going to see the delivery, then we'll see if these planes are going to be Ukrainian or Romanian. My biggest fear, as I said, is that for as long as they stay nationless, is going to be a huge legal problem to go after Romania for these jets, because you would have to prove that the jets have ordnance on them. If they have ordnance on them, then it can always privately own the whatever, but you need to furnish the identity of the owner, and I don't think that's going to ever happen. So it's still going to be remain a military item. I'm scared, as I said, that they will just try to make, probe attacks, get up into Romanian airspace to a certain altitude, slide down Ukrainian airspace, try to engage whatever they want to do with it. If they get shot, well, too bad. But it wasn't a Romanian plane. If they don't get shot, haha, stupid Russians. This process is my main fear because, as I said yesterday, I have no problem believing right now that everyone wants to escalate one last time on, at least one last time on the Western side, given that it's going to shit for Ukraine in short term. We don't know in medium term and long term. The second news, as I said, we are still seeing the same fucking absolute impotence on the European side when it comes to ammunition. The latest contract that the Germans concluded with Rheinmetall over mortar rounds, see Rheinmetall being contracted for 100,000 mortar rounds, 120 millimeters over 24 months. The biggest thing about it is the jump in price. The price has almost tripled. The contract itself is said to be in the low 3 digits. Actually, it's about 187 million euros. Part of it is for retooling and investment. 47 million is said to be so. But I don't really know what they're going to invest into for 47 million. And then the rest is going to be for the production itself, so the premium. However, it's a fixed contract, which means that for if in 24 months the raw materials and whatever inflation goes up through the roof, they're going to have to take a loss. My issue with it is that the price point per piece should be, as I said, should be around 1,630 euros, which is in line with what was proposed by Bulgaria for the same type of mortars for about 60 to 70,000 pieces to an unknown customer, probably the US, and then shipped to Ukraine. That was about 1,550 US dollars per piece X work. So basically, it's going to be also a offset price. It's going to be around $1,700 per 120 millimeter mortar rounds. We are on the same page everywhere. The manufacturers are setting similar prices. So the huge price war that we saw last year between Bulgaria and the rest of the European manufacturers is, in my opinion, now gone, which means that whatever the Americans are going to give as money outside of their control is going to be, in average, twice as expensive as it used to be. This means and for other items up to 4 times more expensive. But that's something else. This means that whatever money is going to be spent into Ukraine is going to deliver less from what they had already amortized. This is very interesting, very important for the Russians, because that means that unless the same inflation reaches Russia, which actually it's very possible, I'm not excluding that, but right now the way Russian enterprises are working is through a very low level salary inflation. We're speaking between 8 and 15%, but probably it's gonna go up a notch about 20% because they're gonna have to need people to work there. This means, as I said, that the war is going to become a lot more costly in absolute numbers for Ukraine and for those who support it. And this is, I think, the opportunity for Russia to try a gambit, and that gambit is literally to be open to China, and not Iran or North Korea. It's literally be open to China. I said, listen, this is what's going on. The cost for the war on the Western side is going to go up for a while, for at least 1 or 2 years, and then the price is going to stabilize. Why? Because, of course, you're going to pay from 2,000 to 4,000 for artillery rounds. It's all good, but then it's going to be 4,000 there. So the cost is going to already be amortized. It's going to be an expensive cost, but you're going to be able to actually afford it because, they can print monkey money. That's the point. In Europe, it's going to be a bit more difficult with the ECB, but on the US side, it's not a big issue. They can print as much monkey money, and if they want to actually pay Rheinmetall in dollars, they can do it as well. This is the main advantage right now Ukraine can have, which is America going even worse into its inflationary cycle. And then, Russians can just literally go to China and say, listen, this is the situation. Ukraine is going to get less and less for its money for a short-term period, 1 to 2 years. So what I'm proposing you is give me what I need in short term as well. And you ask what you want. Of course, we're not speaking about territorial cession on the Russian side, but at least a couple of things I may want. So nuke design, some shipbuilding. Once again, I'm not saying the Chinese don't know how to build ships, but I'm speaking about subs. If they want a Typhoon style sub, if they want things that they cannot have right now, I know it's tricky, but if you want to quadruple your productivity and if you want the same thing that Ukraine actually has, because Ukraine literally, if the West didn't give them tubes, artillery barrels, HIMARS, of course, and now it's giving them planes. And let's be honest, if the target for about 18 months is to reach at least 60 planes, that's a huge deal because at the end, Russians in pure jets have around 360, 350. Of course, they can produce them on their own, but it's not a small influx because Russia is not going to put its whole fleet on one basket. So on that aspect as well, is what I said. Even if a lot of people think that the F-16s are going to be strike jets, it doesn't make sense. Why? Because we did the calculus. The Americans are going to cede what 500 GSOs to the Ukrainians. If you have 60 jets that are going to make all these strikes, if every jet has the capability to strike at once, you're going to have what 120 GSOs shot at once, and it leaves you with like 20% of the total that might be given spent in one time. Yeah, of course, maybe that is to help you out with quote end quote a breakthrough. But my logic when I see a GSO at 370 kilometers or a GSO at 1925 for the year, to me it just looks like you're gonna hit Russian bases in Russia. And this is the problem we're speaking about. So it doesn't make any sense unless America wants a bigger trouble, because I think if I cannot believe that Russia is going to stay just standing if that attack on its nuclear triad is going to happen. I think that that's going to accelerate the escalation, and Russians are just fucking reply with a nuclear tactical attack somewhere in maybe in Dnipro, maybe in Zaporozhye, maybe in Kryvyi Rog. So this escalation that everybody's saying that those are going to be for strikes, to me, it doesn't make any sense to have all these planes for strikes unless you are expecting to get them shot down. That's something else. But so far, it has happened on the ground with the Su-24s, not on the air, or at least we don't know of one Su-24 shot in the air, and nobody on both sides has confirmed it. We know about the 5 Su-24s in Staro-Konstantinov, which apparently were probably not in flyable conditions. They were there to be cannibalized, which is also good, no problem. And about 2 others probably destroyed on the ground, but that's it. We don't have any other thing in the air. So I don't see how suddenly, if you cannot shoot down the Su-24 at offset range, you're going to start and hit a F-16 at offset range. To me, at least, it doesn't make any sense. But maybe you guys know better. So my opinion is that the F-16 is not there for strikes, or at least not completely for strikes. They are there to contest the airspace and push some of the Su-34 UMPK attacks further down the line, so rendering the UMPK somewhat less effective. The situation with that, as I said, is that unfortunately it's only possible in select areas of the front. So basically along the Crimean coast and probably around Zapo. But anywhere else, they're going to be within a AD NAS. And this is going to create, I think, a lot of Zrada moments. So the tempo of delivery is something else as well. Because right now there are 5 for training. Both sides are saying that in 24, Ukraine can count between 18 and maybe 41, although I don't believe it. I think they're gonna start with 24 for starters. But in overall, the whole point here is that Ukraine, it's not that it's not being given enough to win or not to lose, because this is the biggest argument right now. Ukraine is just going through something that is a slow death for as long as it remains like this, unless there is an intervention from the US and France. It's just going to be a slow death that even though they achieve a certain level of parity at some point, then the Russians are just going to fucking pile up on it. Remember when HIMARS was reigning supreme last year in 2022, when everybody was speaking of HIMARS. Now the HIMARS themselves in Zaporozhye did, as I said, less damage to the Russian forces that they did to apparently to the Wagner forces during Bakhmut. And Bakhmut was supposed to be a complete rout for Ukrainians, and was a bad situation and a bad solution. In this case, we are seeing what I said last year when the war started, that if it goes into attrition phase, it's not that the West doesn't have the means to produce them. The West doesn't have the time to produce them, and also doesn't have the will to produce them, because that would mean a lot of white elephants. Right now, Rheinmetall, I don't know what the fucking deal is, why they're gonna make another investment of almost 50 million over mortar rounds, because deep down, okay, even if you want to replenish the mortar rounds that you send to Ukraine, you also have to produce the mortars to fire them, because let's be honest with it, that's one of the things that do not reflect very well into Oryx list, for instance, on both sides, by the way. A lot of mortars are lost on both sides. For instance, we don't see molots anymore. Molots are gone. Most of the mortars right now are either captured Russian or donated by the Allies. And this is why suddenly you supply such a huge influx of Western model mortar rounds. And that's it. That's pretty much where it is at right now. I didn't foresee that it would be that fast. I also thought, if anybody remember the space when there was the first screaming contest with the other persons about how the fuck I didn't know what I was talking about, and the other guy was working for DOD, whatever, and I was a Balkanoid having a meltdown, which I was effectively starting to have. The point is, I said back then that between November and February 2024, there would be this narrative of lack of ammunition, and it's true, not because there is a real lack of ammunition, but there is not enough for them, and I say it as well, there is not enough for them to sustain both offensive and defensive capabilities all over the front. And the biggest situation here is, and I come back to what I said yesterday, is that actually the Ukrainians lost way too much assets compared to the smaller front and compared to what they were supposed to be doing. They did a lot better in 2022, probably because, as I said, the situation was different. Russians were still stretched. They were still not coping with the situation good enough. But in 2023, it changed completely. And once again, I'm going to say something people don't want to hear it, and it's very funny. It's literally playing an Italian team in football. You're fucking dominating against these guys. At some point, you are a 1-1. You look around and you say, what the fuck happened? Like, we could have scored 10 times. Didn't happen. This doesn't even happen like that. I'm an old guy. I remember the 90s and 2000s when it happened like that. Now it's a bit different. But this is how it was back then, and this is how it's going on for Ukraine right now. They were so convinced that everything was fine, and in that terms, what Zaluzhny said about, I after 2 months, I finally saw that it was a stalemate. Bro, I don't know what narrative you're fucking telling us about, but the numbers followed by Ostinters show that this situation was already ongoing for you guys for 6 months before you discovered it. So in a sense, that's what I'm going to tell again. The biggest problem that we have right now, for Ukraine at least, for Russia is a completely different sense, is that there is no way out of where they put themselves, because there is also no smarter way for them to fight. It's not like suddenly they're going to fucking receive 1,000 CV90s. Also, by the way, CV90s, I don't know if you saw the one destroyed around Bahmut. And I had this. I wanted to point out to a member of TWK, because I said the funny thing with the CV is that it doesn't have a proper tank commander site, because the tank commander actually has a cupola, doesn't have a rotating site. So they basically have to turn the whole fucking turret to be able to see around. And the funny thing is that that's a huge handicap, but nobody brings it up on United 22 and do the first pieces. And that CV90 is exactly the Ukrainian army. They think they are in better position. They think they have better stuff. But the reality, when you show it, is that what's Western is not always better. It's sometimes quite actually worse. You can mock Soviet thinking. You can mock Russian vision of this war. But then when you check the reality, the only thing keeping the Ukrainians in game right now is that there is an untouched stock outside of the Russian reach, because this is a proxy war. And that's it. And now we have the bullshit about Rheinmetall. By the way, Rheinmetall should have started or at least built the Puma, or what the fuck was that, the Panther factory somewhere around Mihailovce. Where is it? There's none. It's just bullshit. And once again, Rybar started with this whole nonsense to fluff the CEO idiot from Rheinmetall. But this is the point I was going to tell you guys. Actually, Ukraine is in a situation where right now the idea from most Ukrainian nationalists is like, we need to mobilize for war. I'm like, you're going to mobilize what? What's your economy going to do in order for you to mobilize? Are you going to make more ammunition? Are you capable of doing that? No, you're not. Otherwise, nobody's going to fucking start making contracts of 2 billion euros for things that you were supposed to deliver yourself annually. at maybe 1/6 of the price in peacetime, and you still didn't do because it was too costly for you. You didn't have the budget for it, and nobody was buying Ukrainian shit. I'm sorry to say, it is what it is. So where are we with this? What's going on with this? And once again, we are to the point when Ukrainians have deluded themselves that they could beat Russia, not defend themselves and make the war unwinnable for Russia. They could beat Russia. And this is they stood there and took a fucking beating all over 2022 by thinking that the Ukrainians at some point would just roll over and die. This is my mental vision, especially when you think how late the realization came of the Kherson debacle. And I think that the main takeaway of this is that nobody learned from 2022. Russians a bit, Ukrainians absolutely not, or at least the wrong lessons. And now Avdiivka is really proving to be how less one side learned and how wrong the other side learned. And that's why you see the situation that I just exposed. I hope it's 100% true in the sense that it keeps going like this. We can that the situation with 47th is bad, and they're way behind the line of scrimmage. Let's use a American football term. And that's it. What I hope is that we can see a little bit more Lancet work behind the Ceretina, because that would prove that the Ukrainian forces around there are starting to stage troops for a counterattack, and the counterattack is exactly what the Russians need right now in order to blunt whatever capability the 47th and whatever other brigade is going to be brought in to defend Avdiivka. It also says something, and we spoke about it after the acute analysis of the Black Swan guy, Emilio, who said Avdiivka is not strategic. And now we have the situation when Avdiivka is so fucking strategic that in general, Ukrainians themselves are making it such a big deal. It's not even the Russians. Russians know what they're doing, or at least I hope they know what they're doing. But Ukrainians themselves right now are putting all the fucking lights on Avdiivka, up down to the point of showing that they're fucking losing drones, they're losing points, they're losing space, and they are in basically the worst situation ever when it comes to the north of the city. So yeah, guys, that was more or less the express space today. I wanted this because I wanted that you like could link what I said almost a month ago with now. And unfortunately, yeah, it happened. The martyrdom of the previous spaces makes it a bit complicated to actually say to everybody, yeah, I told you so. And it's not an I told you so at all. It's just like it looks like that's what they're trying to do, and it looks to me at least that the effect of the Russian attacks and the Russian situational warfare there is proving very, very, very interesting for the follow-up into this war. Yeah, guys, it's done. That was my short space. If you want to intervene, up to you. I'm not gonna stay very long. I just took it because I'm seeing way too much science over what I exposed about 3 weeks ago, and honestly, I hope to be correct. And I also need to tell you guys it's gonna be extremely bloody if I'm correct, because cleaning up the coke plant and cleaning up the northern part of the city, given the underground passages, we're going to see Mariupol scenes again, with the difference that in Mariupol there was a actual blockade, but here, yeah, there's not going to be a cauldron. Up to you guys. So if you want to intervene, it's your turn. If you don't want to intervene, it's not a problem. Okay, guys. Apparently, is there an audio? Can you hear me or not? Because apparently there's a small issue with the spaces. Come on, Z, it's your turn, man.
Mobilization. So right now, when Russia mobilizes, so most people, a lot less of them go to the actual front lines. Some go to maybe to the defense industry, doing logistical work, etc. But if
Yep.
you speak about Ukraine, even if it has the manpower, with what you are going to equip these people?
Yeah, that's why actually I don't know if you remember, I spoke about the fact that if Ukraine has such a great potential, why the fuck are they basically contracting a gun assembler in France for 10,000? I mean, 10,000 should be ridiculous when it comes to the whole deal. The Americans should have them, and also in a sense, guys like Vernet Caron assembling these rifles are going to be a lot less, in my opinion, a lot less efficient and maybe reliable than grabbing whatever guns the Americans are going to give them, especially because, yeah, the US Army or the US military in general is going to have a lot more capability to refit whatever rifles are not in good condition. If Vernet Caron is going to take 12 to 18 months to deliver those guns, what happens when they need to be properly refurbished and so on? So on that aspect, it looks to me, of course, those are R15 models, so they're pretty much well known. But what about warranty? What about whatever issues in the fabrication and control and so on? So on that aspect, it's what I said. Ukraine is making dubious choices and very questionable choices, and this comes from the fact that itself it cannot quote unquote mobilize its economy when it comes to, in my opinion, of course, you can disagree with me. I'm not saying that I'm perfect, quite the contrary, but in this case, I think that Ukraine, for the moment, is in a very bad spot, and even if they quote unquote mobilized, to me, I'm gonna say something very, very egregious, and I hope you don't take me like for an asshole, but it literally looks like a spare moment for Ukraine when this shit is being said. Like, we're gonna mobilize and everything's gonna be fine. I'm like, brother, with what, when, and how are you gonna protect your industries? It literally looks like a Germany 44 moment, and you need to be also aware that Germany outproduced every single other year in 44, and of course it was the swan song of that war and of Germany's ambitions. But in this case, to me, it makes absolutely no sense what is being said on the Ukrainian side about the fact that they need to, let's say, both uh, mobilize the country, militarize the economy, and so on. I'm like, okay, but I don't see how much more militarization can you impact on the Ukrainian economy given what's going on for now 2 years there. To me, my biggest situation, my biggest problem is that the Ukrainians do not seem to understand exactly what they want from this war. On one sense, they're saying that we're going to win it. On the other sense, it's like literally give us more supplies so we don't lose it. And I made the Catch-22 reference or the Zugzwang reference. So I think, in a sense, the Russians had the right I'd say, the right approach, and they literally found out that for many, I'd say, reasons, the Ukrainians were not in the best shape possible, which led to both a failed counteroffensive, which once again I'm saying it's a shared bastard between both the Americans and NATO and the Ukrainian leadership, and also the fact that when you see what they're doing, like they are literally procuring outside while at the same time they're claiming they're going to do it inside. And when you see also how the logistical patterns work, they are still working 100% through donations. They are still working through 100% via privately purchased privately purchased goods, civilian vehicles. So in that sense, my biggest concern for the Ukrainian side right now is not as much that they can or cannot mobilize, is that they are deluding themselves into something that can be done in a completely different approach. So in this case, if you want to mobilize, Ukraine, you want to mobilize, the first thing would be, unfortunately, let's say it honestly, it's grain requisition. So you need to stop exporting your grain and start trying to process it in a sense that would allow you to have the basic amenities of the soldiers. Because if you check it properly, a lot of soldiers are saying without the volunteer work, so without people paying their own money for shit that's not produced in Ukraine, or mostly not produced in Ukraine, there would not be any kind of supply line. Or at least it would be completely insufficient. So that sense is that if you want to mobilize your economy, you are going, in one sense, to stop making easy money when you're Ukraine. You're going to have to stop exporting. You're going to have to stop doing a lot of things that you're doing lately. And my biggest concern is that Ukraine not only is not doing that, but they're having these requests of actually exporting it. And I understand that higher currency is very important because you need some products faster than you can make them yourself. But then don't start talking about topics like mobilization, like preparation for, I don't know, counteroffensives and so on. Also, a big important part is that there are too many voices speaking on the Ukrainian side. We can speak about the military informants or military reporters on the Russian side, and it is a problem. I'm not going to start lying. I really find the way there's some people are allowed to talk and spew shit, because that's the biggest problem here. They are literally saying stuff that it's not. I mean, I'm going to take the case of Romanov because it's not like the 10th time in very short term that the guy is literally sowing panic on the Russian side. But those guys are on the ground people, let's say it like this. On Ukraine, first of all, you had Budanov saying that we're going to start a foot mobile ground offensive. Like, bro, what the fuck are you saying? Then you got Zaluzhny saying something, and as I said to you guys yesterday, saying like, oh, it's a stalemate, we're not going to win, we need more ammo, we need more this, more that. And then you got Zelensky coming back at it and literally saying, yo, Zalupitska, what the fuck you saying, bro? Ain't no way we stalemate, bro. We finna win, bro. And that's the problem. And then you now learn, apparently, that Zelensky wants to just throw Zalupitska away. And it's pretty logical. I understand it, because there is no way a military leader is going to speak for how am I going to say this? He's going to speak for the political leader. The military usually, and that's how republics work most of the time, the military shuts the fuck up and lets the political honchos, have their way. But what Zaluzny said, and this is the major thing that I've kept saying, is that he said the truth. Okay, this truth we knew if you followed, I'm not saying me, if you followed the war, we knew that it was going to come for Ukraine at some point because it already came in January. The Ukrainians couldn't fucking go further in a very depleted front in Svatovo and Kremenina and up north. And then they let the Russians blunt them on Bakhmut, and the Russians took losses. I mean, I'm not gonna make it like a you know a joke or a walk in the park. But the biggest situation that I have right now is that we don't see this on the Ukrainian side. We just don't see it. On the Ukrainian side, what we're seeing right now is that whatever is going on, they think they know better than whoever is helping them out. And the disruption between the military side and the political side has never been, in my opinion, greater than now. And of course, on Twitter, people are going to start throwing shit to Syrskyi or Zaluzny. I personally think that the second is an asshole and was pumped up by the Americans to become something he never was. He wasn't a smart guy, but they chose a figurehead they could count on, and that figurehead right now just got disavowed by the political leadership. While the first guy is literally constrained by what Ukraine is. And I think Syrskyi, okay, it's a Moscow graduate, whatever you fucking want to call it, Syrskyi is, in my opinion, the embodiment of Ukraine. Not bad, not good, dependent of what they really are, which is not that much. And this is where I'm calling with the mobilization again. The problem with Ukraine is that for many reasons, many factors, they enjoyed a success that technically should not have happened if this war was normal, but it's not. Russians chose absolutely mind-boggling objectives. Then they didn't press when they should have pressed. Then, of course, as I said, the Americans came by and turned the war into something that was never supposed to be, which is mass attrition war between two sides that are never in my life. I would think those guys would have gone at slugging match against each other, because that's how much the discrepancy in both force generation and force capabilities. But still, here we are. This war is such a mess in general. But still, it's not a mess because both sides cannot fight or are not able to fight. It's a mess because one side is now still working to a war economy, an economy of effort, while the other side is throwing everything it has. So at that point, you get up to a situation where, as I said, you're going to have one side going to the max and matching you while you're doing something that's average or even mediocre, because let's be honest with it, Russians have been mediocre in many cases. But once again, what happens, as I said, when the Russians start even slightly leveling the ground, if they're not mediocre but they're average, Zappo happens. What happens if the Russians still stay mediocre but add volume? Well, what is happening right now is happening. So this is my whole point into that. I don't think the Ukrainians cannot mobilize more. I think that more mobilization for Ukraine is just going to add more woes to what they already have. And by the time they've solved those woes, those problems, then the Russians are going to mobilize as well. And this is the main situation when it comes to Ukraine. They are going to bottle up a lot faster than Russia. And it doesn't matter where the arsenal of democracy is going to find rounds for them to give. It's the rest that matters. And it's all good. They can give so many more Abrams, yet only 31 have been given. And it's very possible because a huge part of that mistake, a huge part of whatever is happening to Ukraine right now, is also due to the fact that the tempo war that we saw in the beginning, that Ukraine could sustain because it was a hit and run tactic. So the Russians were getting hits on every side because they were too thin. But at some point, when they tried to stay their ground and repel the Ukrainians, it worked perfectly in Nikolaev region, and they stopped them in Kherson for over 6 months. And to be honest, Kherson was surrendered. It's maybe cope, but it's also the truth. Russians surrendered Kherson city to Ukrainians, of course, for tactical and strategic reasons, but they still didn't fight over it. While Ukrainians literally decided that between 7 and 11,000 of their troops were going to mummify themselves in Mariupol. And nobody even blinked an eye over that. And it's the same thing happening in Kherson again. Ukrainians have no problem sending hundreds of guys to get slaughtered in Kherson over some marshes. Nobody is contesting that. Nobody's saying, oh, guys, what the fuck are you doing? Strategically, it's a fucking mistake. Nobody is doing anything. Actually, the West is literally already making fucking fanfic novels over 2,000 Spetsnaz killed in the Kherson area. This is also the other problem, that the biggest issue for Ukrainian mobilization, in my opinion, is not as much that they cannot, is that the people who are going to help them out for this mobilization are complete lunatics. And they are leading Ukraine to a serious defeat in 2023. Both the pro-Western leadership and also the Western leadership, because in my opinion, that's also another part. I don't really understand what's going on with this. I replied to a Serbian guy, I think, who was like made this superb tweet yesterday by saying, "Oh, Zaluzhny, a general of a democratic country, when he can say the hard truth without getting thrown out of the window." I'm like, bitch, what the fuck are you even talking about? That guy telling the hard truth how? He literally ordered it. And this is also the other part. Everybody is trying to hide the fact that this glorious counteroffensive was telegraphed for so long, from so far, by so many different people on both sides, Western and Ukrainian. And we all said that the end goal of this was madness. It was going to be a failure. The CIA itself said that the results were going to be very limited. So, yeah, there is where we are. It was a bit long, and I went a bit off target here. But what I wanted to say finally is, like, yes, Ukraine can still mobilize something. They can still try and militarize the society. The problem is not the militarization itself or the mobilization itself. The problem is that Ukraine right now does not have what it takes for it to make a difference, because it had 20 months to do that. And in those 20 months, they spent, as I said, initially over $8 billion per month on the war. And then from this year, if we have to check what was spent according to the Ukrainian budget for 2023, they were still at $6.2 billion per month. So what's going on is very simple. Ukraine has less money in, can spend less money out, but when you do what Ukraine receives from its own economy and what it gets out of it, that's how much Ukraine can spend right now on the war. So for them to mobilize completely would mean even less income for the Ukrainian state, because you're going to disrupt the economy. Ukraine, unlike Russia, And as I said, that's why Ukraine cannot stop the grain itself, because that's its only hard currency right now, along with other things. But Russia can completely put a stimuli on its own economy, because it's still selling oil, gas, and all the rest of the shebang. On top of it, it controls its own energy supply, which Ukraine cannot do. This is what I meant by Ukraine can always try to mobilize, but it's not itself that's going to cater to its own war. It will have to be with someone else's money and someone else's energy and someone else's input. So in short, there is not going to be a lot more to mobilize. What they can do, however, this is something that I've done now for 20 years, 20 months, is someone's going to pay for sustaining the supply for the Ukrainian people, and the Ukrainians are just going to train for war. So they're going to put their lives on a box, and they're going to go and die or kill and be killed. That's the problem for Ukraine right now. What is being asked from Ukraine, from its Western allies, is unfortunately to be ready to die. And I find it very cynical, because we had this criticism already by the Americans that say that they had war gamed and prepared all this thing, and Ukrainians, quote unquote, knew, according to them, that the war was, or at least the counteroffensive, was going to cost a lot of lives. And instead of that, Ukrainians stopped obeying to that plan, that game plan that had made previously with the Americans, and went into a completely different way. So that's my situation here. What is going to happen? How the Ukrainians are going to change this differently? And then we can always speak about corruption within Ukraine, because that's what a lot of people hinted, including Zaluzhny. Like, that was literally the pimp writing a piece for ethics and whatever. And this is one of the problems that I'm going to keep saying. The Ukrainian leadership and its Western backers sold a quintessential war between a democracy and a fucking dictatorship. But the reality of this war, and a lot of people have said it already many times, is far more complex. Ukraine is not a democracy. That piece of shit of a land, and I'm sorry because we have trapped here, and he's Ukrainian, but I'm going to say the same thing about Albania. Don't you worry. I've never been less truthful about my country. I have this joke that I usually made about my own country before, Nigeria of the North. The corruption level there is high. The bonanza of free cash, the bonanza of favors, because suddenly when you're a military commissar, you can decide who goes to the war and who doesn't. When you're a doctor, you're going to start issuing an invalidity certificate, a fitness certificate. And when you are a military commissar, you're going to do just the same. You're going to accept or not the certificate. So if you want to avoid the war, you have a couple of entry points into the voicomat, which you need to pass before. And in case that you cannot cut it because, well, you're a young man, you're fit and everything, what you're going to do? You're going to pay someone to pass you through the border and get you into Europe. So this situation in Ukraine creates the perfect storm for corruption. creates the perfect storm for corruption. But this was completely ignored. Of course, there were fluff pieces in 2023, but we are putting out from the day one, line after line, video after video of the situation. And a lot of people can say, oh, yeah, but those are outliers. They're not. If there weren't outliers, where are the troops? Maybe this is a part of, how can I say, a wake-up call from the Ukrainian nationalists and whatever. Maybe. I'm not even saying that, it's not true. But why would they sound the fucking wake-up call if the situation is not that bad? Don't forget, these guys are the Gherkins of 404. But the difference is that they are getting smashed at the front. Gherkin is not. I mean, the dude polluted the debate for so long with his dooming. And in a sense, the war is not even going worse since he shut the fuck up. Okay.
Just to add
Yeah, tell
one
me.
question following this. So, if we suppose that Ukraine is starting from disadvantaged position and the West is compensating for this with the war effort, basically the West is leading the war effort for Ukraine with the supplies, money supplies, arms supplies, etc. And as you said, Russia is each time matching, although it has another maximum, but it's only matching the war effort by Ukraine. So
Yes.
whatever Ukraine achieves, Russia tries to achieve it. Now the question is, when do you think Russia will be able to have three times comfortably the war effort by Ukraine? So we can maybe guess that it will have a decisive victory in this time.
Well, the thing is the following. Let's say that Ukraine triples whatever it has now, and Russia matches that. They're neck and neck. Um, the depletion of the Ukrainian society is going to be big. People are going to turn around and see where is Taras, where is Mikola, where is Serhiy, where is Semen, Semyon. This is the thing. It's not a simple, you know, you are uh, putting bodies on the line and nobody is calling you out for that. I posted another video where the pay rate has been changed in so what that a guy who is like a couple of kilometers from the front but still gets artillery up his head is paid less than the guy who is straight at the front. I'm not saying this is bad or good. Once again, it's not. I'm not here to judge that logic. I'm just saying that if we have to have this discussion, the logic would be pretty simple, and the logic would be that how can I say this? The Russians do not need to overmatch, the Ukrainians for what it stands. And they don't need to overmatch it right now. I'm not saying they should not do it. I say quite the contrary. They don't need to overmatch it right now for one main huge reason. The Ukrainians, whatever they try to do in this case, are the ones who have the poke for it. They are the ones who are forced to liberate the country. Russia in itself, that's why I said the greatest thing that happened to Russia in 2023 is when it fucking ceded the initiative against whatever Ukraine had by then. Because, first of all, in this war, unfortunately, it has to be accepted, defense is easier than offense. No questions asked. You can turn this equation as much as you want. The second of all, it managed to finally do what it wanted, which is reduce by a large amount, and I'm saying a huge amount, both the front line, but also its lines of supply. And Avdiivka, it's only made possible because it's just next to Donetsk. And the backfield around Donetsk is huge. And this is why I'm repeating to you guys, the most important part for Russia right now is not to fuck up the new layout, the new strategic layout in Ukraine, which is Ukrainians made the mistake Russia didn't make in 2022, which is maintaining its very poor strategic layout. And that happened by literally forcing my friends from Wagner out of uh, out of a job, and in a sense, whatever people said, it was so much better for Wagner to have done what they did, which is an absolute aberration. And as I said, they had everything. They could have been a backbone of the Russian army for so long. They chose not to do it. They chose to stay idiots. Prigozhin, for some reason, chose money over what he was supposed to do initially. And that created the situation, a very dangerous situation, I think, in June, when I was bewildered. I'm sorry. I couldn't understand how maybe the staunchest supporter of the Russian operation in Ukraine suddenly turned to be its worst traitor. As we spoke about that they managed to shoot down more helicopters and do more damage to the Russian Air Force than Ukrainians had done until then. Anyway, so my opinion is the following. Russia doesn't need to do anything right now. It doesn't need to be complacent. It needs to match every single step that Ukraine is undertaking. But right now they don't need to, because at some point, Ukraine is going to have a huge problem with how it's mobilizing itself. And this is, I'm going to repeat it, this is our biggest mistake when we analyze this war. Instead of analyzing it properly and saying, okay, strategically, whatever was done before, it's over. Like the Russians had the plan, it didn't work. Now what they need is something completely different. And what they need is literally stay there, take as much punishment as they need to take, and at some point it will just open itself. There is no much to be said or to be done on the I'd say the Russian side for the moment. Everything is way too easy. So if I have to, give a layout for the Russians, wait the Ukrainians out in 2024, and I think by 2025, that's why the Russians have apparently counted on. Ukraine will be in such a horrible state. This can be wrong as well. I'm not saying it's going to be 100% right, but Ukraine is going to be in such a horrible state, in my opinion, that the only thing that will remain for the Ukrainians as a solution, I'm repeating, as a solution, would be a German-style 980th offensive, trying to force the deadlock. But I don't think at any moment that the Ukrainians are going to be able to do anything about it. And this is exactly why I hope that the war is going to finish with these undertones. So basically, a huge attrition war, putting the Ukrainians down to the limit, instead of great Ura attack, aggression along the Dnieper fields. I honestly hope that it doesn't come to that. I honestly hope that the Russians just wait them out for the moment. I made the calculus last time. It cannot be worse than last year. The only way it's going to be worse than last year is outliers. And so far, we don't have a repeat. The Atakam's attack on Lugansk and Berdyansk ended up by actually costing the the Ukrainians a lot more than it brought to them, because the biggest situation for the Russians is the following. They thought that they were going to have a big problem when it came to the actual loss of helicopters. But so far, even if all the helicopters are lost, first of all, it's a mixed number of helicopters lost. It's not a they are not only attack helicopters, quite the contrary. But the most important part, once again, is that there is no follow-up. There is not a second strike. I don't know, in Taganrog when they're redeployed. There is not a second strike. I don't know in in Milerovo when they're redeployed. No, that's the problem with this proxy war. You got the advantages of your disadvantages. Whatever is in Ukraine is going to be hit by whatever they want to do it. But the reality deep down is that once they're out of the Ukrainian lines, those weapons, for the moment, as I said, are not employable. Should they put their faith on the promises of the Americans? I don't think so. I really think that is bullshit, and at some point the Americans will have to give the Ukrainians the possibility to strike in Russia, and that's why I'm saying that I still fear for the F-16 being armed with very long-range weapons, but that would escalate this war in such a way that the Americans would actually lose their gambit, not win it, and then you can try and say whatever you want to the Russians, but their nuclear threat being hit with American weapons, with American intelligence, we are beyond the proxy war. It can also be that the Russians do not reply to that, would be, in my opinion, a mistake. But you don't know. This is the whole point now. You don't do something, you don't know how it will pan out. So far, the Americans have done it. But I don't think that everything is doable and everything can fly for the American side. So that's my point in here. I think that Russia should just stay the course for the moment. I had a completely different opinion early on. I was dreaming an attack around Sumy, them going back somewhere else, even taking Kharkov. But those, I think, are going to be the apotheosis, and that apotheosis needs to stay the course of the year 2024. By 2025, we're going to have, in my opinion, completely different situation. And if things keep going like this, Ukrainians are going to sue for peace. Not even the Americans. The Ukrainians are going to come for peace. So that's that. Snake, your turn, and then it's going to be our general. Go on, Snake.
Hey, yeah, I just wanted to comment on your on the question of mobilization, and this is something that obviously people on the Z side have debated off and on for quite some time. I mean, what is taking a war seriously? And we have a very good example of how mobilization can fuck up in Israel. Israel basically took about 9% of its working population offline, and then on top of that, lost all the Palestinian laborers, and now they're talking about importing 100,000 Indians.
Yep.
I mean, it's like basically this more. The GDP is expected to contract, 11% this quarter, and like this is essentially if you go the full mobilization route, you better do something quickly and end it quickly, or else your economy is going to be complete shit. Yep. And this is why Ukraine, contrary to what perceptions are, there's still an economy in Ukraine, and it's actually gotten way worse because if you track trade data. But they were about a year ago. They were tracking about 1 billion trade deficit per month, and now it's up beyond 3 billion. Yep. So there will be a kind of balance of payments crisis at some point, and they're also still on the hook until through 2024. They're still on the hook for 3 billion in IMF repayment loan repayments, yep. And that's and that's another reason why, like, they haven't declared, they actually haven't formally declared war, because they still have foreign debt obligations they have to fulfill. So all this points to a society that's kind of stuck. Like, they want to do anything more, like a greater mobilization, they have to have a complete bankroll by the U.S. But the U.S. Funding beyond like last year's levels is actually is perhaps like out of the question. I mean, they say they want to have 61 billion. I just don't see how much they're going to get out of that, or basically with Congress debating it in front of the election year, there will be some reduction, and that's not going to allow them to actually do a greater mobilization. Because as you said, like, if they do this, it has to be on somebody else's dime, right? And if they want, and if Ukraine itself were to like do the full mobilization, they would literally only have like 3 months to end the war, and before the society collapses. So yeah.
On that aspect, I would not put a time frame, but I would absolutely agree with you that once you're gonna pull, let's say, 500,000 guys out of whatever they're doing, you better end it quick. And if it bogs down, because that's also one of the things, Russians could do it because they could afford it. But it took time. We spoke about this. It took almost 6 months, first of all, to put themselves to war footing. And it's literally it's a pastiche of a war footing. I cannot believe if the Russians go really for a war mobilization, what's going to look like. Of course, it's not going to be all rosy, especially for the Russian economy. But the most problematic part for me, compared to where we're speaking about, is going to be something completely different. And that problematic part is that, on the Ukrainian side, of course, is that what happens if you hit with 10 times more troops the same wall that you hit with the counteroffensive you prepared on Zaporozhye? What happens is that after 3 weeks of literal counterattack with 10 times more troops, the Russians somehow slaughter your spear, your tip of the spear. The biggest problem with Ukraine right now is also that, unfortunately, while a lot of things have been done to stop the publication of losses and all that thing, the society still communicates a lot more than whatever other people are trying to do in other wars. I mean, this is one of the things that makes me a bit weird about this war on both sides. There's so much information coming out, and that's why initially the mobilization on the Russian side looked like a shit show, because it was, first of all, but it also had no tangible results. You couldn't see, okay, we mobilized all these guys, but the Ukrainians are still advancing. And then when we all saw that the Ukrainian advance petered out about 2 months after the mobilization started having tangible results, and it was first confirmed by Italian newspaper, and the title was "Those Mobics Who Stopped the Ukrainian Army," and you're like, "Yeah, bitch." So the whole situation here, it's actually pretty simple, and it's I'm going to say, for Ukraine at least, you are going to have something that is, in my opinion, pretty logical. And is it going to take 3 months? Is it going to take one bloody battle? Is it going to take actually a gradual reduction? Because we saw they were bled out in Zaporozhye. They didn't stop. They're still not stopping. They're still trying to go for North Verbove and trying to push to Kopani. And it doesn't matter, apparently. It's like there is no control on how they want to do this. And in one sense, I start to understand why. There is no other way for them. The article I replied to, the Serbian guy, said like, yeah, for Putin, this is actually it's not true. It's for Zelensky and for Ukraine that this war is no other way. Because after this war stops, win or lose, you have a whole process of rebuilding that's going to start to happen. If they lose this war, you're going to have such a horrible time, first of all, explaining, because you're going to have audits and all this shit. I think for Zelensky, for as much as this war goes on, he can both take out his political opponents and the alleged attempt to sack Zaluzhny, in my opinion, is exactly that. He doesn't need to actually recall anything. He doesn't need to make amends. And of course, that Schuster piece on him being isolated, being slowly becoming this messianic and Faustian character within the Ukrainian leadership plays a lot into it. So my opinion is the following, my logic is the following. Okay, you are there. You just did whatever you did for 2 years. Also, very important part, we don't know the real losses. I think the Ukrainian society, once the real losses are going to be revealed, and if Trapped is correct, and I think he's more than correct, the Ukrainians are gonna wake up to 100,000 dead. And I think Zelensky doesn't want that to happen so soon, because the whole point of his reluctance to negotiate with Russia right now is said to be that he doesn't want to negotiate with a terrorist, murderer, war criminal like as Putin. Fine, all good. But what if it's not because you don't want to negotiate, but this is because you're going to have to say to the Ukrainian people how much of a shit show the war is. The other problem is that I have the feeling that any negotiation, especially at Ukraine's disadvantage, would need a audit of their forces. Exactly what happened to Georgia when they lost the war, the short war against Russia. And what we risk understanding is that, first of all, and this is just a cheap shot to Oryx, we're going to find that Oryx, for the Ukrainian side, lacks probably more than 50% of the losses, or at least a substantial part. This will not erase the Russian losses, but will also explain that for a while, this whole war was a fucking shit show on both sides, but one side, unfortunately, could hide its losses better than the other. So I think for Zelensky, it's not only a ethical question or a purely political question. In my opinion, is a lot more than that. In my opinion, we are talking about something completely different. In my opinion, we are talking about Zelia knowing that he will have to explain to a lot of people what the fuck happened. And to me, it makes no doubt that the wake up for the Ukrainian people is going to be so huge. So in this sense, my scare is also that fact for fact, maybe Zelia is going to go and do what he has always done, you know, just go above and beyond. But in this case, I think he's going to be alone. So yeah, sorry guys. General, up to you. Unless you have anything to add, Snake.
Hey, everybody. So, I know it's economy stupid, but I wouldn't compare Israel to Ukraine, obviously, because it came out that they had at the beginning of the conflict like 200 billion of foreign reserves, and they used, I think, 40 or 50 to stabilize the shekel. So I think they are better prepared but Ukrainians, unless grain and energy, as you said, nothing more is left unless you count EU because, they are cashing out them. That's not a problem. If we reach to pay like 60 cents a kilowatt, like it happened last winter here in Sweden, or the food price, which is 70 to 100 plus. But what I wanted to say is regarding what you told before about escalation, is that when the F-16s apparently coming pretty soon, mainly air-to-ground platform or whatever, U.S. Air Force uses them. I think they won't hold up giving them just ABMRAMs, but they maybe are going for C7 or C8 and for the full package of standoff weaponry like JSO or YASM. So that puts a bigger problem on the Russian air defense, with Crimea bases and Belgorod and Kursk, which are in proximity to Ukraine. So probably an escalation going on there, and I don't know, but maybe still the Russian Air Force has to be really aggressive on those airfields, like to push them further west, because I don't know how would be possible to use them without air refueling as the U.S. Air Force uses them, and with tanks, less range, more drag, less weaponry, and all the rest. So I don't know what you think about this.
I don't know if you thought about that, but it's exactly what I said. That if they give them a ground strength package, it's not how can I say this? The number alluded to, so it's just not logical for a ground strike package, even if you add a cap on top of the strike package, because there are just too many planes to fire not enough ammunition, given that America itself is down to I think 2,000 GSO made of all kinds. So they're going to be at between 900 and 2,000. We're going to give them 300, even 600. If you have a double decked GSO and 20 are doing the strikes, you got 40 per time. 40 per time, it's 20 strike missions per plane. I don't think anything justifies that, unless, and that's what I touched upon, you are going for Russian territory. If you go for Russian territory, I don't think that the JASMs or GSOs, whatever, are there for ground attacks on, let's say, depots and stuff. They're going to go for a bigger fish. They're going to try and cut out the standoff attacks from bears and
Angus Xartol,
and if you do that, I'm sorry, but then
you're getting the tax.
You are attacking the Russian nuclear triad, and unfortunately for whoever thinks differently, we are going to have fried Ukrainian almost immediately, because that's what's the only way to stop them. And then, of course, this could be used by the US as a breach of the NPT. So basically, a non-nuclear state is being attacked by a nuclear attack from a nuclear state, and then they could try and intervene. with the difference is that now the nuclear taboo is being broken, and so are the Americans going to risk their own troops after they created the situation? Once again, yesterday I said it makes no doubt to me they are ready to be absolute assholes and not lose their dominance in the West. But my biggest problem here is not what they are ready to. My biggest problem is what their allies or their poodles in this case are ready to endure. Ukrainians dying by nukes or by something else, it's not a big deal. As I said, they have seen worse, they will see worse. But are the European bases that going to get fried, ready to get fried? Are the Europeans ready to embark in these escalations? In this escalation, I don't know what China is going to say as well, because suddenly what you're doing, if you are the Chinese, you're seeing the Americans arming a proxy to hit your deterrent, and it's not just a simple armament as we know. Giving GSO, it's the same thing, but basically like giving a scalp in a sense. It's a very, 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 very large escalation, and for the Chinese, what's going to stop the Americans tomorrow to drop F-35s to Taiwan or to another place? It's even, I mean, it's very, very, very problematic when you're a Chinese leader. You can say, okay, it's not my problem, I'm not involved, but the pattern is there. And there's also one thing I want to say when it comes to China. The Chinese right now are looking at this war from the inside, at least the drone war. They have the receipts on everything that's been sold, that's been shipped. They know what are being used by both parties to detect, to fight the drones, and also to make everything concealed or visible. So for the Chinese, they are literally understanding where this is going. If the Chinese leadership doesn't get that this is a huge rehearsal on how the Americans are going to exploit whoever is willing to die in the war against China to debilitate China, then the Chinese have no business being world hegemons. And on that part, I completely understand what's going on. So in this sense, when it comes to the Russian escalations towards Ukraine, if it goes that far, I think the Chinese would be perfectly happy to let the Russians fry the Ukrainians, because nobody's going to do it in any other way. If the Americans tomorrow, for instance, get attacked on their triad, they're going to react exactly the same way. They're going to react with the most heavy hand that they can muster. In this case, it's going to be okay, either super large conventional reply or straight up nukes. And
maybe they go for the bridge.
What do you mean? But they had. Listen, that's the funny part. They have now all the items to hit the bridge for 5 months. They've tried only once with Storm Shadows and it failed. The other problem with the bridge, this is something I want to say, but I don't want to say it that way, is that the bridge has so far even less interest for them than anything else. It has the less interest for them than anything else, because the Russians, first of all, need to be kicked out from the land bridge, and secondly, are already creating something that is going to replace that bridge, at least on this side, very fast. So I'm talking, of course, about the railroad. And the railroad, in this case, the Azov Railroad, in this case, is making it almost impossible to stop the influx of supplies from the Crimean Bridge. Of course, it's not the same, and of course, it's going to create a lot more troubles. And the attack on the BDK, on multiple BDKs, is exactly that. So in this case, we are speaking about Saratov and friends, but in general, what the Russians are doing right now is the proper way to deal with the situation at hand. They are building the railroad downstairs. They have not allowed the Ukrainians to be able to hit them by multiple assets. So basically, right now, you cannot employ HIMARS. Maybe when the PRSM ER comes, or when the F-16s come as well. Because finally, if you attack the bridge, you can attack any supply line. You're not forced to limit yourself to that. But the situation, the biggest situation that we have here on the Ukrainian side, in my opinion, is that they are going to have a mixed package, and they're going to try and see how far they can get with the F-16. Right now, as I said, I thought that the scalps were going to be there for the Black Sea Fleet, and unfortunately, only a small portion of the Black Sea Fleet was impacted by the scalps. And the biggest problem is that none of them is out. This is something that I wasn't expecting. None of the ships that have been hit right now by Storm Shadows are out of the game. Of course, they are out for the moment, but first of all, the Minsk has been put afloat again. What kind of superstructure going to put on there, I don't know. The Rostov-on-Don could be finished off by another set of strikes. Still not attacked for a second time, still being repaired under tarps. And now for the Askold, just the same thing. Ship is afloat, of course, extensive damage, but still repairable. And this is my problem right now. Like, if you are going to play this game, so you're going to send the GSO, which actually has an even worse warhead than the Brooch, where are we going with this? Like, if I know it seems like cope. A lot of people are going to say that this is cope, but the reality is the Lookout itself, which is a NATO linking account, was dismayed at what the fuck is this? Is this a 450 kilogram warhead hitting a ship? And I'm like, yeah, bitch, that's the problem. You thought that everything that you build is gold bars, but it's not true. Everybody's submitted to the same problems, and those problems are EV from the Russian side, a miscalculation of the real capabilities of your systems, and we had that also with the Leopards. Everybody was clamoring, we want to free the Leopards, and now we're going to be 6 months after, and probably with the harm, the Leopards are the least impactful assets that were given to Ukraine. The only thing that they did is just destroy the German industry reputation, and we had already these complaints by Ukrainians with the Panzer Haubitze 2000. So this sounds like cope. I know that a lot of people are going, this is just fucking cope. That shit was shit. Yes, but look what is being said by actual Navy guys. They thought every single ship being hit by the goddamn Storm Shadow would be a wreck. And so far, we've seen that there is only one ship that maybe, I'm going to repeat it, maybe is done for, and we're not sure about that. And that is supposed to be the Rostov-on-Don, but it's still on dry dock, and the guys are still...
I don't want to contradict you much on this, but
Tell me. Dig on, man. Bro?
Hey, can I just get in here?
Yeah.
I think the AMRAAM-C is a lock because they're already getting that for the NASAMS. And
they are off limits, and then the sanctuary that was supposed to be with Crimea and everything.
Oh, Bro, I understand what you want to say, but I'm missing. I don't know if you guys can hear, but I'm missing half of the. Oh,
Yeah, he's disconnecting and reconnecting.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Snake, go on.
Okay, so the Amaranth C is a lock because they're already getting that from NASAM. So, and this is C7 is basically what they have in Europe. They may not get the C7, but they might get, but it's going to be Amaranth C. The good thing is, though, from ground launch from low altitude, like these things would have a very similar range to NASAM's, which is about 30, 35 kilometers max. That's not, I mean, so it really would not be that much of a threat to Russian aviation. On the issue of the JASMs, I actually do not think they would ever send JASMs. I mean, this is it's very telling. Like they want Germany to empty its Taurus missiles. They want Europe to empty its Storm Shadows, but they're not even broaching the topic of JASM. Why? Because essentially the USAF and USN went all in on JASM and LRASM. They're basically the same missile, but they basically went all in on it. And if you have a situation where like the Storm Shadow lands like intact, but because it's a dud, and they capture it and they were able to run tests on it, figure out the antenna gain, and essentially like figure out ways to counter it, jam it. This is a disaster. Basically, it would actually reduce the effectiveness of the sole weapon that they would actually have in confronting like a first tier threat like Russia or China. So Russia capturing it and by extension giving the data to the Chinese, that would be a disaster. I mean, it does make a certain amount of sense that because they actually did just this year or last year they transitioned the JASM assembly lines to do JASM ER, which is the 900 kilometer range missile, but they still have a bunch of the older 370 kilometer range missiles that could actually, if you squint, they fit under MTCR. But the thing is, like, I just don't think they would, just because the disastrous chance of like Russia capturing one intact. I mean, this is why they want Europe to empty all of its cruise missiles before they even mention the word JASM. So yeah.
I have a second opinion on that, and it's going to just fortify what you said. The second opinion is the following. On top of that, they want the Europeans to probably empty as much as they can of their stocks because they would like a quick refill. But as we heard, and there was a Twitter from both industry specialists in Germany, but also the German state, the Germans don't want to go there because that would force them to either open the chain of production, which means another investment of about 200 million, or guess what? Buy ready off the shelf. And who's selling that technology? Unfortunately, you either buy French, no way, or British, but it's the same system, or you got it, JASM. And the funny thing is, and you know this as well, everybody in Europe right now is going for the F-35. So the Germans are looking at this and saying, okay, we just fucked ourselves with the Apache procurement. We're going to fuck ourselves with the F-35. We're literally murdering an industry and emptying our stocks. In order to refill, we are either going to make something else or we're going to have to buy. And guess what happens when you buy? You pay more. And this is, I think, it reinforces your position. First of all, for the Americans, it makes it sure and certain that they're not going to lose key tech to Russians and then Chinese by extent. But also they can maybe bank on a sale after that. Go on, Stick. Sorry,
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense because, again, like the old JASM, 370 kilometers is actually too short range to do anything in the Pacific. So there actually would be a rationale to like dump the old JASM and sell them in Europe at a markup.
Yup. And the best part of it is that 375 is us, but if we have to be honest, that thing is going to go for 100. And 400 is barely short range of the Taurus, and the Taurus was absolutely made for a let's say European confrontation when you see it properly, because smaller seas, closer shores, and so on. And if it's to be used on the ground, just the same. It makes perfect sense for a European war. So I think that your point and mine reinforce themselves, and also if it's 100% true, show exactly what's going on in the minds of the American military-industrial complex. And I'm gonna give an answer to what I think General was alluding to, and he's right on that. That we also thought that Crimea was going to be a sanctuary. The problem with Crimea, once again, is very simple. It's extremely open, and Sebastopol is probably the worst place to be called a sanctuary for one main reason. And that reason, and I already said it multiple times, that main reason for Sebastopol is that it's completely open on the west. Sebastopol Bay is for when you control completely the goddamn Black Sea, but that area is gone. It's gone for so many other reasons, and also if something made sense now that the Sea of Azov is a Russian lake, let's say it like this, it's a lot better to have it, to have whatever you want as a repair base or a safe haven base in goddamn either Novorossiysk or the other, in Kerch. And Kerch was hit. Kerch was hit with an approach again, and they did it properly. They took out the podlet over the horizon radar, then took out the Avdiivka battery, and they can completely fly around the Romanian coast, and they have a shortcut. And you are forced to go to do cap now so much further, and this was one of the explanations why they wanted to have Snake Island, but Snake Island wasn't defensible unless they took Odessa, of course. And even if they have Odessa, the problem with that is that the Ukrainians have still more depth. The biggest issue for the Russians when it comes to these games is that, unfortunately, this is the kind of play that NATO was supposed to have. Basically, aviation superiority. This has always been the case. It's the rest that we were expecting differently. So tanks, artillery, ground forces. So yeah, what can I say? General disconnected. Guys, if anyone wants to intervene, it's up to you. Otherwise, we're calling it a day, and then we see each other the next time. Okay, guys. So be it. Have a nice day. Let's see what this week brings to us. I will redo an Avdiivka rehearsal probably at the weekend, this weekend. And I will also recall all the points I pointed out when it came to... okay, Diamond is there. Okay, come on. Come on, Diamond. Yeah, Diamond, come on.
Yeah, a new tweet that you sent about, the Avdiivka thing with the Bradleys getting hit by Landsets. Does that mean they basically have like fire control over the backwards areas with their drones?
No, actually, it's not exactly fire control because the Lancet is a long range asset. It's a very long range asset. What it meant is that if the Bradleys thought to stop in Ocheretine, that means that they're not in the city itself, but they come from a back. This is what we saw also with Robotino, where actually instead of staying in Avdiivka to prepare their staging ground, they started to be pushed more and more back to stage. And we saw that the last strike on a 82nd Brigade striker was over 28 kilometers from the front line. And this is how it starts, and this is the whole point. If your quick reaction force or motorized force is being hit 15 to 20 kilometers from the line you're supposed to push, then you have a problem. Because first of all, they're seeing you. If they're seeing you, they can hit you. And if they cannot hit you, they know you're coming. So instead of hitting you at 20 kilometers, they're going to hit you at 10. This is the point here. And my logic was that if we came to this point, which meant that Bradley's Inoceretine could not stop and breathe, which is what happened here. Then the northern part of the Ukrainian defenses on Avdiivka was going to get rocked soon enough. And the initial push that the Russians made from the 10th to 21st, which was very costly, actually was, I'd say, grossly said, was literally demining and pushing away whatever first levels of defense the Ukrainians had. And apparently, given all the information we have right now, geolocations, strikes, even from the Ukrainian side itself, the Russians just managed that. They are now completely over the railroad. They are completely clearing out the immediate first hedgerows behind the railroad, and that's shit for Ukraine. And on the other side, whatever Ukrainians want to engage into this defense, they will need to first of all prepare it way deeper, and also it's under scrutiny. Let's say it like this.
All right, thank you.
No problem. Okay, guys. If anybody else wants to intervene, as you know, now is the time. After that, it's going to be, as I said, I'm going to try and redo an Avdiivka, explain my thought from the last thread that it's not existing now, and then we are going to see how it has evolved. Have a nice day, and I hope you weren't bored. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.